This is VOA News. I'm Marissa Melton. It's a holiday weekend in the United States where Americans are kicking off the start to the summer season. Memorial Day weekend means millions of Americans are on the move. AP correspondent Mike Hempen reports.
The AAA Auto Club says this holiday weekend could be one for the record books. More than 42 million Americans are expected to travel at least 50 miles. Cape Cod tourist Patty Steelman has some advice for those traveling this weekend.
It's Memorial Day weekend, so there's going to be a lot of people on the road. So make sure you have your coffee like Carly has and enjoy your ride.
Carly Powell, who also made the drive to Cape Cod, says the trip was long, but she doesn't regret it.
The drive was a little long, but it definitely was 100% worth it once we got here.
It's not just motorists who are going places. Federal officials say the number of air travelers already has hit a pandemic-era high. I'm Mike Hempen.
Passengers flying into Britain faced major delays after landing in airports on Saturday due to a nationwide issue affecting the automated border control gates that scan passports upon arrival. Images posted on social media showed long queues with hundreds of people at London's Gatwick and Heathrow airports, with frustrated passengers complaining of having to wait several hours in line. Heathrow is Britain's busiest airport. It said it had deployed extra staff to manage the queues and was working with Border Force to help resolve the problem. Clashes between police and supporters of the opposition leader in Senegal have left one person dead and several injured, according to the friends of the victim who spoke to the Associated Press on Saturday. Clashes erupted Friday as opposition leader Ousmane Sonko called on his followers to follow him to the capital, Dakar. From Washington, this is VOA News. Iraq launched a $17 billion project on Saturday to link a major commodities port on its southern coast by rail and roads to the border with Turkey, in a move designed to transform the country's economy after decades of war and crisis. Reuters' Lucy Fielder has more.
Baghdad hopes the Development Road project will transform Iraq's economy and aging transport network after decades of war and crisis, shortening travel time between Asia and Europe in a bid to rival the Suez Canal. The project to link the Grand Foul port, which is still under construction, was announced on Saturday at a conference to court Arab investment. Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani said the Development Road project aimed to achieve a sustainable non-oil economy. Iraq's government envisions high-speed trains moving goods and passengers, links to local industry hubs, and an energy component that could include oil and gas pipelines.
That's Reuters' Lucy Fielder reporting. Pope Francis returned to work on Saturday, meeting with a famous American director after a fever interrupted his regular schedule. AP correspondent Julie Walker.
The pontiff met with Martin Scorsese and a number of other artists while addressing a conference on the global ethics of the Catholic imagination, according to Vatican News. He also met with visitors from Georgetown University. The Vatican's confirmation of the 86-year-old Pope's fever sparked concerns about Francis's health. In March, he was rushed to the hospital, diagnosed with acute bronchitis. The Vatican says the Pope will preside over Pentecost Mass Sunday and meet with Italy's president Monday. I'm Julie Walker.
The U.S. Commerce Department said Saturday that trade ministers of 14 countries in the United States-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework talks have substantially completed a deal to make supply chains more resilient and secure. The development marks the first tangible results of a year of negotiations. U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo told a press conference in Detroit that the first-of-its-kind agreement calls for countries to form a council to coordinate supply chain activities and a crisis response network to give early warnings to IPEF countries of potential supply disruptions. The deal provides an emergency communications channel for countries to seek support during supply chain disruptions, coordinate more closely during a crisis, and recover more quickly afterward. More on this story at our website, voanews.com. From Washington, I'm Marissa Melton, VOA News.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Sunday won Turkey's presidential runoff for a third term in power. Dorian Jones reports from Istanbul.
Even before the official confirmation of his victory, supporters of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan quickly gathered outside his Istanbul home to celebrate. Turkey's electoral board later confirmed his victory, giving him more than 52% of the vote against challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Erdogan, speaking to his supporters on a campaign bus, thanked them for his success. He said, "I would like to thank all our citizens who showed their will for the future, both for themselves and their children." Still, Erdogan, speaking to supporters, said his victory was for everyone. Dorian Jones of VOA News, Istanbul.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Sunday evening delivered what he called good news, a deal between him and the House Speaker on a federal budget. Details from VOA's chief national correspondent Steve Herman in Washington.
A deal on a limit for the U.S. government's debt is coming with just days to spare before what would be a catastrophe, according to President Biden. Answering a reporter's question, the president replied that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy negotiated in good faith. But there is still the question whether the Republican leader has enough support in his own party for the agreement's passage.
And I have no idea whether that votes. I expect he does.
A deal approved by the House and Senate needs to reach the president's desk prior to the Treasury Department's estimated June 5th deadline for when the government will run out of enough money to pay its bills. Steve Herman, VOA News, Washington.
Local officials in Ukraine's capital says Kyiv was subjected to the largest drone attack since the start of Russia's war as the city prepared to mark the anniversary of its founding. This is VOA News. The United States and Saudi Arabia called on warring sides in Sudan to extend a fragile ceasefire due to expire Monday as weeks of fighting reached a stalemate in the capital and elsewhere in the African country. A joint statement Sunday noted the current ceasefire was imperfect, referring to repeated bouts of fighting since the ceasefire went into effect. The current truce will expire Monday evening. Residents reported sporadic clashes Saturday in parts of Omdurman, Khartoum's adjoining city, where the army's aircraft were seen flying over the city. Firefighters were still working to clear roads and secure ancient buildings in the flooded northeastern Italian region of Emilia-Romagna on Sunday. VOA's Diane Roberts has more.
Firefighters used heavy equipment to remove mud from roadsides and pump the last of the floodwaters away from affected areas. 2 weeks of heavy rain caused 21 rivers to overrun their banks and at least 300 landslides after water couldn't be absorbed by terrain that had been parched by lack of rain for weeks. At least 15 people were killed by the floods, and thousands have been left homeless. Diane Roberts, VOA News.
Meanwhile, Syrian state media is reporting airstrikes attributed to Israel have targeted Syria's capital city, the first such strikes in a month. Syrian air defensive have responded to the strikes in the vicinity of Damascus and shot down some of them. State news agency SANA reported the attack late Sunday caused only material damage, it said. The last suspected Israeli airstrike on Syria was on May 2nd, targeting the international airport in the northern Syria's city of Aleppo. American singer-turned-actor Ed Ames has died of Alzheimer's disease, according to his wife. Ames was 95. AP correspondent Margie Zarletta reports.
Ed Ames was the youngest of the Ames brothers. They had a string of hits in the 1950s with The Naughty Lady of Shady Lane, Sentimental Me, and Rag Mop.
You don't have to worry. Do you think I'd endanger the lives of those two children?
Ames turned to acting and is best known for playing Mingo, the Oxford-educated Native American on the TV series Daniel Boone. He was also known for one of the most popular bits ever on The Tonight Show. In 1965, he was asked to throw hatchets at a cowboy target painted on wood. His hatchet hit the target squarely between the legs. I'm Margie Zarletta.
Find more on our website, voanews.com. You can also find the podcast Flashpoint Ukraine and Flashpoint Iran at voanews.com. I'm Joe Ramsey. This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered a video message on Monday to mark U.S. Memorial Day, honoring Americans for defending freedom.
We, Ukrainians, will always be grateful to the U.S. and every American for an extraordinary support.
Memorial Day is a federal holiday in the United States observed on the last Monday in May for honoring military personnel who have died while serving in U.S. forces. U.S. President Joe Biden marks Memorial Day honoring those who died fighting for their country. AP correspondent Julie Walker reports.
After laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery, President Biden said, "Every year we remember, and every year it never gets easier."
We must never forget the price that was paid to protect our democracy.
It's been almost 2 years since Biden ended the U.S.'s longest war in Afghanistan. The president has taken pride that his administration has overseen a time of relative peace for the U.S. military. I'm Julie Walker.
Japan put its ballistic missile defenses on alert on Monday and vowed to shoot down any projectile that threatens its territory after North Korea notified it of a planned satellite launch between May 31st and June 11th. The nuclear-armed North says it has completed its first military spy satellite, and leader Kim Jong-un has approved final preparations for the launch. It would be the North's latest step in a series of missile launches and weapons tests in recent months, including one of a new solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. This is VOA News. Police fired tear gas and demonstrators burned cars on Monday near the home of Senegal's main opposition leader as tensions rise in the capital days before a court verdict is expected. Ousmane Sonko is being tried for rape and death threats against a woman working at a massage parlor and could face up to 10 years in prison. If convicted, he would be barred from running in next year's presidential elections. Sonko and his supporters maintain his legal troubles are part of an effort by President Macky Sall's government to derail his candidacy. Uganda's president signed the Anti-Homosexuality Act of 2023 on Monday, which allows life imprisonment and the death penalty in some cases. Halima Athumani has the story from Kampala.
In April, Parliament passed the Anti-Homosexuality Act on a vote of 341 to 1. In a statement Monday, Parliament Speaker Anita Among said lawmakers heeded the concerns of Ugandans and legislated to protect the sanctity of the family. Among urged authorities to enforce the law in what she called a fair, steadfast and firm manner. Amnesty International has described the law as draconian and says it hopes that Ugandan rights groups will advocate for its repeal. Halima Athumani for VOA News, Kampala.
Zimbabwe's opposition cried foul on Monday after many voters, including some senior politicians, said their names had been removed or misplaced on the voters' roll ahead of national elections. Zimbabweans head to the polls in what is expected to be a tense general vote later this year, with the ruling party accused of cracking down on opposition voices. The president has set a date for the elections, expected to be in August, would be announced this week. An apartment building in the U.S. Midwestern state of Iowa that collapsed on Sunday will be demolished. AP correspondent Mike Hempen reports.
Officials in Davenport say the demolition of what was once the Davenport Hotel will begin Tuesday morning. The collapse injured at least one person and displaced countless residents and business owners. It's not known why the building collapsed, but Davenport Fire Chief Michael Carlston says investigators are searching for a cause.
There's been normal rental complaints, but there has been some complaints to the structure. We issued notice and orders to have those repaired. The building owner hired their own engineering firm to direct them, and the repairs needed to be made.
Residents have not been allowed back inside to remove their belongings due to the building's unstable condition. I'm Mike Hempen.
Find more at voanews.com. I'm Joe Ramsey.